To the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Thank you for joining me today. With me is John Cameron in the middle and Richard Fields on the other end. And gentlemen, you guys change. Usually it's Richard in the middle and John on the other end. And somehow it throws me off every week when this happens. I could switch you, but I just didn't.
I guess
anyway,
switch. Yeah, you're in charge.
Yeah. We should all hope I would be in charge because I'm actually quite disturbed today. And as we hit some of our topics, all of our topics, well, most of our topics I actually find quite disturbing here on our list today. And if we don't get through them all, you can go to libertariancounterpoint.com and we've got the whole list of topics we have. So to start out with, I found out that there's a poll. Democratic voters support harsh measures against the unvaccinated, including, we'll call them internment camps, including what they are. And, and it's like almost half, which I find insanely disturbing that half of Democrats, or half of any group in particular in the United States, any large group, Democrats, Republicans, anybody, are willing to go down the route of interning fellow citizens because they pose a danger to the theoretic danger, to the public as a common good. If it doesn't remind you of Japanese internment, I don't know what part of history you have learned.
What's particularly ironic about that is that the Democrats are so wholeheartedly in support of the Trump vaccine. It was Trump that championed the development of both the Moderna and the Pfizer and all the rest of the vaccine development. He's the guy that got the ball rolling for huge federal subsidies to develop the vaccines or the whatever they are, and now the Democrats are the biggest enforcers. It's a curiosity of our times.
Well, I find that we complain a lot about this country, and I'm there's a lot to complain about. But imagine if you were in Austria and they're making it a pretty major crime for those over 60 not to get the vaccine, and other countries, because of their socialized, wrong word, state-run healthcare systems are forcing people to be vaccinated, older people especially, because the stress it puts on the unvaccinated stress it puts on their healthcare systems. On the other hand, the United Kingdom is looking at this thing and has decided they've reached the level where they can start considering, or very near considering, the thing that we can't really talk about. Well, we do talk about it, and that's why nobody can find us on the internet, as endemic. And talking about it as we're going to have to deal with it like we deal with the flu. So I'm not going to, spout statistics and all the rest of that stuff. Everything's there for everybody to see on the CDC website. How dangerous the thing is, what the infection fatality rate is, the fact that the risk to children is listed as negligible, whereas the risk to vaccines for children is listed as some. The number of deaths from the flu exceeds the number of deaths from COVID in children. I mean, it's all insanity. A friend of mine has said that the whole COVID thing amongst the Democratic Party has assumed the status of a religion, and I have a feeling that's true. But the idea that and Bill Maher, of all people, a long time ago, looked at a poll about the so-called party of science, and I'm not saying the Republicans are any better, because boy, they come up with some crazy stuff too. That's why we're all libertarians. That Democrats in a poll thought that 50% of people who got COVID required hospitalization. So the so-called
it's like less than 3% that actually require hospitalization. It's like 2%, 3%, something like
that. Who knows even with those numbers, because there's still questions about of and with, but anyway, it's just the idea that and we all know that governments and political parties, most of them, except for the Libertarian Party, we make hay by talking about the wondrous possibilities of throwing off the yoke of the powers that we let be, whereas other political parties make their hay from fear. And you get what you pay for, basically. But I found that when I read that, I found it depressing and shocking. I agree with you on that one, James.
Yeah, it's deeply disturbing. That's how much fear can turn the people who used to be claiming to be for basic human rights, and have now essentially abandoned it because they're afraid. They're afraid of air, right? They're afraid of just kind of living life. But there is a little hope. The UK, as you pointed out, has lifted most of their COVID restrictions starting sometime this week, and I think Ireland followed suit. It's because they said the COVID wave has peaked, and they simply, the underlying truth is they simply cannot economically or culturally afford to continue down the path they're continuing. And so they're going to use the COVID has peaked as the excuse to say we can't afford this anymore, and so we're moving on.
They also might be looking at statistics. And worldwide, the statistics would pretty well demonstrate that countries that have very strict lockdown and vaccination standards, for instance, Israel, where I think it's 90-some% of the population is vaccinated, mostly triple vaccinated, and they still have a high COVID outbreak rate. And then countries like Sweden, where they're a lot more laissez-faire, particularly about the whole social distancing and masking thing, and their statistics are roughly, no worse, probably maybe a little bit better. And, you've got countries like Australia, which is turning into, it used to be a penal colony, and they're returning to their roots, locking up everybody or putting everybody in so-called concentration camps if they are unvaxxed or unwilling to get vaxxed. Same thing is happening in China. You're having a maximum crackdown. If there is one person with COVID, they shut down entire cities of millions, or even a handful of people. They shut everything down, particularly now that they're worried about the Olympics being disturbed one way or another. So it's not just the United States government that's responding, we would say, irrationally. It's governments all over the world, and there are other places all over the world which are beginning to see the light of day and beginning to realize that there are trade-offs, that there is a serious risk from COVID. Nobody has ever, we have never denied that, but there is also a serious risk of the trade-offs of restrictive policies being more damaging and more expensive and more harmful than the risk of the COVID itself. So that's the bottom line. What is the safest method to go about doing things? And what Britain has done, I think what the Prime Minister has said is that we're going to treat people as adults and let them make up their own mind. And I think that is the very libertarian and very correct way of going about COVID policy. Boris Johnson got this one right.
Yeah, eventually, finally.
I know we want to move on, but the real quick, there's and I don't know the guy's name, and I'll try to get it out to you. There's a British physician that drills down on these numbers on I think it's YouTube every week, and he showed because England, the United Kingdom's made up of England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and they pursue different policies at different levels. They're not, all on the same page. And Wales, I think it was Wales, pursued very stringent lockdowns and controls and all the rest of that. And their Omicron spike was 3 times what the UK's was with lesser lockdowns. So, lots of stats are showing that over and over again, and they're out there for anybody to read, especially the CDC numbers. I don't understand why people aren't reading those, because they're there in black and white. And after you read those, you understand that if you're old and have comorbidities, that you're at risk, and if you're young and you don't, you're not. Pretty much. I mean, there are outliers to anything, but anyway, we probably beat this to death. This whole COVID thing to death.
Yeah, we got a quick one. I just want to point out that this weekend there were protests all around the world, freedom protests against mandates, not against the vaccine, against mandates, including truckers in Canada. And this one's actually quite dangerous for Canada, because you have something like 50,000 truckers are off the roads headed to Ottawa to complain the vaccine mandates in the trucking industry. And if those truckers are on a truck march to Ottawa, what they're not doing is delivering goods to your grocery store or delivering, goods to the factories and all that. And so Canada's going to have a problem. That inflation is going to actually increase, and the supply chains is going to become even more fragile because these people are just continually interjecting themselves in the market and expecting it to be able to function properly. And
just remember, whenever any politician complains about the supply chain problem, that is a politically created problem. There was no supply chain problem. We have an extremely complex global economy, which operated without a glitch, without a temper tantrum, very smoothly for decades until the government decided to come in and throw a monkey wrench into the works. And that's what they did with the COVID lockdowns in 2020 and what some governments continue to do today. Supply chain bottleneck, government created problem, 100%.
Yeah. So we're going to move on. We're talking about government-created problems. Some members of Congress have good timing when it comes to stock investments. So, as they're making these policies about, supply chains and whatever, and all these various other policies, somehow they manage to always be on the right side, or more often than you would normally like to assume, that be on the right side of these decisions. It's quite strange.
Well, I don't find it strange at all. I think there's an old saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But I think it should be changed to lack of accountability corrupts, and complete lack of accountability corrupts completely. No matter what happens, these folks are just going to do what they're going to do and get away with it. What I really find the prime message to this is not their timing. The prime message is how much impact all these lunatics in office through their various regulation and bills have on the economy. The government in a libertarian world operates in the background quietly, a servant of the people. There's very little of it. And so they don't do things that throw the stock market in gyrations and inflate the money supply and all the rest of that. But what's happening now, because government has so much power, the people that we let be in power, that they can control by a simple regulation or act or a lockdown or promotion of a vaccine or anything. They can control what the markets do, and that's what I find annoying. Let's emasculate, wrong word, don't want to be gender specific. Let's take the power out of these fools' hands so that the market can do what the market's always done, which is, have capital go to where it's treated best, and have people who are willing to work hard and come up with a bright idea, make more money, and have all of us benefit as it has over the last couple hundred years.
There's another old chestnut that I think applies, which is it was originally, I think, referred to the missionaries going to Hawaii. Missionaries decided to go to Hawaii to do good, and they did very well indeed. In fact, the missionaries, the English missionaries, ended up owning most of Hawaii by the time they were through with their good deeds. Likewise, young, idealistic kids who are mostly ill-informed by our pathetic public school system go to Washington to do good, and they do very, very well. Once they figure out how the rules affect things, they figure out, I could, this bill is coming up, I think I will make this or get rid of this investment ahead of time, since it will negatively or positively impact my my investments. It's I saw a chart just today that shows that something like, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but the idea is correct. Something like 50% of congressmen, congresswomen, Nancy Pelosi, are you listening? We're trying not to discriminate based on gender, are multimillionaires, or at least millionaires, whereas something like, way under 5% of the American public are millionaires. There's a reason for that, and the reason is not because they're a lot smarter or a lot more adept in financially than we are. They simply have insider knowledge that we don't, and they have insider knowledge because they're making the rules and or are privy to the regulators who are making the rules. It's a corrupt system, and the reason it's corrupt is because we allow government to be associated with the economy. What we need is we have a separation of church and state. What we need is a separation of church and economy, or at the very least, a separation of government and economy, or at the very least, a separation of government and money. Get rid of the Fed.
As an NFL player pointed out this weekend on Twitter, and I wish I'd grabbed a screenshot, he says, as NFL players, we're not allowed to gamble, which he completely agrees with. We're not allowed to gamble on NFL games, which he completely agrees with, right? Because they can manipulate the thing. He says, but why are Congress people allowed to buy and sell stocks when they can manipulate the stock market with laws? And, he has a point. Why are they allowed to, an NFL player can't gamble on an NFL game he's not even playing in, because he might somehow, cause some kind of issue either in the gambling side or on the playing side, right? He might manipulate the game or somehow have insider information. But yet our leaders can buy stocks and bonds as they pass laws to mandate people take the product that a company is offering. It's entirely, as Richard said, that is kind of the definition of corruption. And speaking of corruption, we're going to quite move on. Kansas and California cops have been using civil asset forfeiture laws to essentially have armed robbery of these legal businesses. Legal marijuana businesses use armored cars to transfer their money from the store to the bank or to wherever they got to store their cash, because it's all a cash business. And yet now they're using, asset forfeiture laws. I can't speak. Asset forfeiture seizure laws. And because most of these states, you can't do it in the state level because these are legal businesses. They involve the feds. And so they send the money off to the feds so they can keep it, and then the feds send some back. And that's how they're getting around it. And it's a corrupt way for local police to, punish legal businesses in their state, but
and
still
get rich.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
It's a multifaceted problem. The first problem is that federal law makes marijuana still a control, class 1 bad drug on the controlled substances list, which means that at the federal level, marijuana is illegal as hell, even though it's been legalized in many different ways at the state level. What that means is that banks, by and large, are extremely leery of taking deposits from state legal marijuana businesses, because they're afraid that the banking regulators will come down hard on them, probably conduct an asset forfeiture operation. Who knows? So there are a few banks in a few states that will allow state legal marijuana businesses to do business, but they are so few that armored trucks have to be hired to carry cash across state lines where it's not legal, in order to find a bank that will actually do business with the pot shop. And that's what happened here. The armored car company was traveling across Kansas in one case, or across San Bernardino County in California in the other case, and they were pulled over for a so-called, supposedly their license plate frame was hiding one of the numerals on the license plate. Now, if that's not a bogus reason to pull somebody over, I don't know what is, but that was the excuse for pulling them over. The driver, very probably under interrogation, said, "Hey, yeah, I'm going to wherever to pick up cash to haul to someplace else to deposit." And they said, "Oh, okay, let him go," and put the federal narcs on their trail, basically trailing them. And when they picked up their cash, they nabbed them. It's highway robbery in the worst Robin Hood sense that you can possibly think of, except that they're not giving back to the poor.
Yeah, and the fact that the one of the news stories, and I do we put all, or do you? When I say we, I mean the people that actually do work on the show, not those of us that sit here and talk. Put up these links on the website.
Yep, you can find them all at libertariancounterpoint.com.
Okay, cool. They actually plan these robberies and these armored car trucks, because this is the year 2022 already. How'd that happen? They have video and audio recordings of these cops celebrating how much money they're taking. And they were disappointed because they only got $250,000 out of one truck when they got 750 out of the other. And there's recorded conversations then saying, well, at least we got $1 million. And they spend this money. They give it to the Fed, and then the Fed takes their cut, just like any other pimp or drug dealer, and then gives the rest back to the local cops to spend as they will. And these are people who are not doing any crime. And we've had on this show probably over the years 100 examples of pastors taking cash to build a new church, somebody taking cash to buy a car, and cops take it. And then they negotiate with people and say, "Oh, we give you back 10,000 or 50,000." And just, call it a good deal. So it's extortion, it's highway robbery, and how it's still condoned under our legal system, I will not know.
Believers in big government are the greediest people on the planet. These simply are, and have been for the longest time. There is no greedier person than the tax collector. But the tax collector is just the agent of the politicians who tell them to go out and collect taxes.
Well, kudos to IJ, Institute for Justice, for going after these lawless cops in San Bernardino County and in Kansas, and suing them on constitutional grounds, many constitutional grounds, as well as state and federal statutory law, to stop the practice. Let's hope that it makes it to the Supreme Court, and there is a definitive ruling that says asset forfeiture is government theft, pure and simple. That's all it is. It needs to be stopped, and stopped immediately.
Yeah, theft is theft.
I hope so too. And one other thing that if our people watching this show don't already know it, police departments around the country depend on and have in their budgets this legalized theft. They rely on it for a lot of their toys, their tanks and armored cars, and their little getaways where they train on hostage negotiation and all the rest of this stuff that some town of 25,000 in Podunk, Iowa is never going to do. I mean, it's disgusting, and the sooner the Supreme Court takes a look at it and says it's patently unconstitutional, the better.
Well, I think we have to remember, John, where this started. The drug control, the drug war, as just like the gun control, they all started because they wanted to keep, drugs, and they wanted to be able to punish those dirty other people. Whether it was drug control was, the Mexicans smoking pot, gun control, you don't want those black people to have guns because they might rise up. So, take your pick. But either one is the same root, that you want those other people not to be able to participate in normal aspects of life because, fear? Is that what we're back to? We started this thing talking about fear, and we're ending the show talking about what the kind of inhumanity fear will let us engage in.
Yeah. Well, and we, it's strange, the evolution of the so-called progressives. I like to call them regressives because they're, regressing to the kind of centralized, autocratic, untouchable control that kings had. They're all in favor of eliminating prohibitions on drugs because these prohibitions target people of color much more than they target people who, what do we call, not of color? White people? I don't know. Colorless people? What do we call ourselves? I don't ever refer to myself. I don't focus on race, so I don't know how to call myself. Yeah, bald guy. I don't know. Anyway, so all the statistics show that those people most affected by these drug laws are people of color, and this was done this is not a unintended consequence. This is the intended consequence. And politicians who finally spoke the truth about it, who started all these crazy drug laws, will flat out say, yeah, we couldn't make it illegal to be black, so we made drugs illegal. We couldn't make it illegal to be black, so we made guns illegal because this basically a way to keep people down. But the political fervor of the leaders who are supposedly represent political or people of color have forgotten that Martin Luther King wanted to own a gun to protect himself and was not allowed to by law. Maybe if he had.
This was after his house was they attempted to burn his house down.
Yeah, and maybe if he'd had a gun, he'd still be alive. Well, he'd be getting kind of old now, but So, and thank goodness, there are a bunch of organizations that I know Black Guns Matter and a couple other ones that you can find through the links on the Libertarian website that are pointing out these facts. But the transition of, Black politicians being in favor of, not only legalizing drugs because, drugs as crimes mostly affect people of color, but guns the same way. Because 33% of young Black men have a felony. So even if they wanted to have a gun in their home to protect their family, since now it's been pretty obvious that these police forces who are busy spending the money they're getting through civil asset forfeiture aren't protecting them, they can't even legally own a weapon. And it's just disgraceful. And I think the worm's going to turn on that pretty soon. At least I hope so.
Yeah, well, we got 2 minutes left, so we all want to talk about one more thing. About the Democrats are falling flat with this Latinx, or however you're supposed to pronounce it. No one knows how to pronounce this thing. This Latinx language that apparently only 2 to 4%, depending upon the poll, of Hispanic people actually like the thing. It actually offends up to 40% of the people of Hispanic people. But yet they continue to shove this down our throat because, the arrogance of academia, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, I said, continue to do that because your Democrats are throwing Latinos or Hispanics or Latinas into the arms of hopefully libertarians. Unfortunately, a lot of them will go Republican, which is not a whole lot better, if better at all. But certainly we're seeing a whole lot more Latinas, Latinos, Hispanics embrace libertarian ideas. And one of the reasons is because they're being essentially talked down to by the Democratic Party. And, as long as the Democrats look at their trustworthy constituents as simply children that need to be helped, as opposed to adults that are perfectly capable of helping themselves, they're going to end up on the wrong side of history, at least.
15 seconds, John. I only got 15 seconds, my friend.
Other than saying, let everybody, the government provides a lot of statistics. I know a lot of them are lies, but if you want to look at something that's important in your life, like your health, go to the CDC website and read these numbers. Be informed when you pressure your politicians.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here with me today. From Libertarian Counterpoint, please remember to love everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you, James.